Hello everyone and welcome to this video. In this video, we will be learning about MCP. So let's begin. Nowadays, we are hearing so much about MCP servers. So what exactly is MCP? Let me try to explain you in a very simple words. MCP is a model context protocol. It's basically an open protocol which allows AI models like ChatGPT to securely interact with the external tools, environments, and the data sources. Now we have three words over here. One is model, then we have a context, then is a protocol. So when we talk about model here, so we are talking about models like ChatGPT, LLMs, right? Context when we are working with the AI, so we need to provide the context. For example, if I ask AI to run the specific file, but AI doesn't have that file, right? So how we can provide that file securely? Now, word securely is basically referring to a set of protocol over here, right? So instead of working in the isolation, the MCP enables models like ChatGPT to access the documents, files, folders. They can interact with the APIs, browse the internet, run the scripts or the code, or use the tools like database, notebooks, and so on. Now, think the MCP as a secure bridge between AI and the real world. Now, the question is that why exactly we need MCP? There must be some reasons behind it. Okay, MCP is needed because the generative AI is great at answering the questions, writing the content, and generating the code, but it has limitations. It cannot access your local files or the environments. It cannot use your tools like browsers, IDE. It cannot have access to the real time data. It cannot have a memory of the previous sessions unless explicitly we provide it. So MCP basically addresses all these by enabling real-time permissioned access to the tools and data sources through a standard protocol. Now let's see in comparison with the generative AI. So in comparison with the generative AI, so generative AI cannot access your local files, but with MCP you can. Now, if you are using the generative AI and you want to access or use the APIs or the tools, you cannot. But with MCP, yes. And when we're talking about generative AI, so generative AI cannot browse file system, but with MCP you can. With generative AI, you cannot call the code functions, for example, run your automated test, but with MCP you can. And then obviously we have to respect the permissions. So the MCP is basically a secure and built-in. And in comparison, when talk about the to remember the structured prompt templates, so generative AI cannot do this, but with MCP we can do this. So this is basically a slight comparison between the generative AI versus the MCP. Now let's dive into some core MCP concepts. When we are talking about the core MCP concept, so you will hear about the context server. Now, this is basically, it can be a local or the remote server which will actually exposes the tools and files to the model. Now, you will also be hearing the prompt templates. So basically, these are the reusable prompts stored on the server and referenced by the model. So model will actually reference those prompts and reuse them. And we need a server which will actually expose these tools and external files to the model. Then we will be hearing a lot about the tool interfaces. So basically, it will define actions like, for example, if we want to get the user info and user info is on your context server, or you want to run the test. So basically, using these define actions, we can the model actually can call those and perform the task. And obviously we are interacting with the external tools and external servers. So basically we want some permissions, some gateways. So basically to ensure the model can only access what the user explicitly allows. So you will be hearing about the permission gateways when we talk about the core MCP concepts. Now let's talk about some scenarios, and we will discuss about scenario in terms of the development and the software testing. First, let's discuss a scenario in terms of the development where AI will be working as a assistant for the developer. So if they are not using the MCP, so basic without MCP, what we will be doing is that you will be asking AI to help in terms of writing the code or debugging the code. And what you will be doing is that you will be manually pasting the code and asking ChatGPT to fix that code. So it gives the feedback, it can update the code, but it cannot run or test that code. So execution part is missing here. But with MCP, what happens is that AI browses your code base, edit files, run tests, and debug issues in the real time. So there's no manual copy pasting when you're working as a developer, right? So hope you understand the difference when you are using MCP and when you're not using the MCP with the AI, right? Now let's discuss the second scenario in terms of the software testing. Just like the development assistant, AI will also be acting as an assistant for the software testing team. So without MCP, so LLMs depend on the screenshots or the visual layout, making automation less reliable and harder to interpret. Again, the LLM doesn't have the access to the files. LLM doesn't know how to update the code. Even as an automation tester, when we are writing the scripts, if if the LLM has access, just like the development, so all those principles are applicable in case of the software testing, specifically when we're talking about the automation testing. But there's so many scenarios like where if you ask ChatGPT to write the test cases, it will write the test cases for the functionality you are defining. For example, you are asking for the login. It will write the test cases positive, negative, and you can not export instance in terms of for example, you say that write the test cases and update my existing test cases in the Jira or the Azure, and then trigger an email. Now there are certain level of task, right? So ChatGPT can write the test cases, but it cannot update your Jira where you have actually written the test cases. So one thing is that again, copy and paste, because the Jira is not accessible by the chat GPT or the model. But with MCP, you can. So understand the concept that the generative AI is basically generating the content. The purpose of generative AI is to generate the content. So you can ask to generate the text, code, scripts, but execution part, accessing to the tools. So for example, if I ask generative AI to send a generated report from my QA server to my management. So generative AI cannot do because it does not have a access to my emails or my QA servers where the reports or the folders where we have the reports, right? But with MCP, because the purpose of MCP, the wholesale purpose of MCP is that the LLMs like ChatGPT can access your external files, data sources so that it have a context. Now, understand the whole term model context protocol. So model is LM is ChatGPT. Now, if I say that email the particular execution HTML report, it doesn't have a context which report I'm talking about. But if I give access to a folder where we have a reports, then now ChatGPT have a access and the context as well, which reports needs to be sent. Okay, and if I expose the email thing and the email clients, so ChatGPT will access my file which is on my server and send an email to the stakeholders. Now it has a context. So model, context, and protocol. Now this whole the process basically the LM is accessing the external file source and tools. So this whole process needs to be secure, right? So it should be standardized, permission based. So that's where the word protocol comes. So model, context, protocol. So that's how MCP works.